He robbed 28 stagecoaches, never fired a shot, and sometimes he left poetry behind. They called him Black Bart. In the 1870s, stagecoach drivers across Northern California started reporting something strange. A man was robbing them, but not like the others. He was polite. He said please. He never fired a shot. He never touched a single passenger, and sometimes he left a poem behind. This is the story of Black Bart, the most unusual outlaw the American West ever produced. His real name was Charles Bowles, born in 1829, by all appearances a respectable man, educated, well-dressed, the kind of man you'd trust with your money, which made what he did all the more remarkable. He'd failed at the gold rush, fought in the Civil War, tried farming, tried prospecting again, and somewhere along the way, Wells Fargo crossed him. The details are murky, but whatever happened, Bowles walked away from that encounter with one thing burning in his chest: revenge. He abandoned his wife, his children, his name, and became someone else entirely. Black Bart's method was simple, almost theatrical. He'd wait by the road in a long white linen coat, a bowler hat, and a flour sack over his face with 2 holes cut for his eyes. He'd step out from the brush, level a shotgun at the driver, and in a calm, deep voice say, "Throw down the box." No shouting, no cursing, no violence. On his very first robbery, he shouted to the driver that his men would fire if provoked. The driver looked into the bushes and saw rifle barrels pointed straight at him. He threw down the box immediately. When he came back to check the scene, he discovered the truth. The rifles were sticks, carefully propped branches. There were no men. Black Bart had robbed a stagecoach entirely alone, with nothing but a shotgun he never intended to fire, and a talent for theater. He walked away with $160, and he never looked back. Over the next 8 years, he did it 28 more times, always on foot, always alone, always polite. Drivers reported that he thanked them, that he apologized for the inconvenience, that when women were aboard, he assured them they had nothing to fear. He never once robbed a passenger, only the Wells Fargo strongbox, only the company that had wronged him. The press went wild. Here was an outlaw who didn't fit the mold. No gang, no guns blazing, no trail of bodies. Just a quiet, dignified man in a flour sack mask, walking calmly away into the California wilderness. They called him the Gentleman Bandit, and then he left a poem. At the scene of his 4th robbery, investigators found a small note tucked inside the empty strongbox. Handwritten, signed with a name no one recognized. Black Bart, the P08. P08, poet, his own invention. The poem read, "I've labored long and hard for bread, for honor and for riches, but on my corns too long you've tread, you fine-haired sons of bitches." Wells Fargo was not amused. The newspapers were ecstatic. Overnight, Black Bart became a sensation, not just a criminal, a character, a myth. A man who robbed the most powerful express company in the West and had the audacity to mock them in verse. Wells Fargo assigned their best detective, James Hume, to the case. Hume would spend the next 6 years chasing a ghost. Because here's what made Black Bart almost impossible to catch. He had a second life. While Hume searched the mountains and back roads of Northern California for a drifting outlaw, the man he was looking for was living in San Francisco, quietly, comfortably, under a different name, Charles Bolton. That's what he called himself in the city, was known around town as a successful mining engineer. He stayed at a good hotel, ate at fine restaurants, was described by neighbors as charming, cultured, and well-read. He didn't drink heavily. He didn't gamble. He didn't visit brothels. He was the last man anyone would suspect. And every few months, he'd quietly leave the city, disappear into the hills, rob a stagecoach, and come back. For 8 years, no one connected the two men. It ended as most things do, with a small mistake. November 3rd, 1883, Black Bart returned to the site of his very first robbery, Funk Hill, near Copperopolis, California. The stagecoach slowed on the climb. He stepped out, ordered the driver to throw down the box. But this time the strong box was bolted to the floor. He told the driver to unhitch the horses and take them over the hill. Then he pulled out an axe and went to work. What he didn't know was that the one passenger, a young man named Jimmy Rolleri, had jumped off earlier to hunt along the trail and was now watching from the tree line. The driver came back, fired twice, missed. Then Jimmy fired. The bullet caught Black Bart in the hand. He grabbed the gold and ran. But in his hurry, bleeding, he dropped something. A handkerchief. A clean, white handkerchief with a laundry mark stamped into the fabric. FX07. James Hume had his clue. Detectives spent days checking laundries across San Francisco. On the 91st stop, they found a match. A regular customer, polite, well-dressed. A mining engineer named Charles Bolton. They arrested him at his hotel. When they searched his room, they found fine clothes, a Bible, and letters from his wife, the woman he'd abandoned years before and never contacted again. At trial, Wells Fargo pressed charges only on the final robbery. He pleaded guilty. 6 years in San Quentin, reduced to 4 for good behavior. He walked out in January 1888, visibly older, his eyesight failing, deaf in one ear. Reporters were waiting. "Are you going to rob any more stagecoaches?" "No, gentlemen, I'm through with crime." "Will you write more poetry?" He laughed. "Now, didn't you hear me say I'm through with crime?" And then he disappeared. He checked into a hotel in Visalia, California. He was last seen on February 28, 1888. After that, nothing. His wife listed herself as a widow in the city directory in 1892. A New York newspaper printed an obituary for a Charles Bowles, Civil War veteran, in 1917. He would have been 88 years old. Was that him? No one knows. There is one more story, unverified, denied by Wells Fargo to this day. The legend says that after his release from prison, Black Bart didn't stop robbing stagecoaches. He just got quieter about it. And that Wells Fargo, tired of being humiliated, made him an offer. $200 a month, a pension, paid for life, in exchange for leaving their coaches alone. Wells Fargo has always denied this, but the stagecoach robberies did stop, and Black Bart was never seen again. He robbed 28 stagecoaches over 8 years, never fired a shot, never hurt anyone, stole a total of $18,000 from one of the most powerful companies in America, then walked out of prison, checked into a hotel, and vanished from history. Maybe he died quietly somewhere back east. Maybe he kept robbing. Maybe Wells Fargo paid him to disappear. The only man who knew the answer left no poem this time.